In today's video for the first Descendant, we're going to be jumping into a build guide, and this time it's going to be for none other than Valby, the most bubblicious girl in the game and just a whole bunch of fun to play in general. This character I found to be an absolute blast because she's a very nice mix of both damage as well as survivability and some great skill damage. In fact, Valby is one of the very best farmers in the game, especially with the infamous Valby run, as you'll be able to grab yourself a whole bunch of extra gold at a nice steady pace. As well as that though, I've tried to make her kit overall more useful so that she's a perfect pick for going into your missions and bosses alike. A lot of damage, a lot of fun to play, and a lot of survivability thrown into the mix. Now, I'm only going to briefly go over her skills because no doubt if you're looking at this video you already know all about her, but she comes with Bubble Bullet. I like to think of this one as a nice little one that can give us a bit of extra damage on enemies, but it is far from the most accurate, so I usually use this just if I want to create puddles in front of myself. Remember, when we're on top of water, and of course when the enemy is, we'll be getting some significant buffs that I'll come to later on, as well as the enemies will be affected by the laundry perk under all of her skills, which basically means they're going to have both their electric and non-attribute resistance decreased by around about 20%. Over to Plop Plop, and this one is just amazing for forming a massive group of water, perfect if you want to get somewhere or do a little bit of damage to an area, but more so if you're trying to create a massive effect of a really big puddle in order to do some damage over time to people, but more so to make sure you're in water the whole time, allowing us to have some uptime on our buffs. Over to Clean Up, this will be the tried and tested. If you've ever done the Valby run for the gold, this is going to be the thing you're using. You're going to be going around in a circle on it, but it's also great for doing during missions or just area denial. You're going to get a nice little tick damage effect with this as well, so the damage over time is far from awful with the setups I'm going to give you. Lastly, we come to our number 4, the Laundry Bomb. This is another one where you're going to equip a unique weapon. This time you're going to be able to fire out massive kind of bubbles. It's going to drag everything into the middle that's affected by laundry, and you'll be able to either take them out with another weapon or group them up for someone else to hit them with a really nice area effect. They also get damage over time whilst they're in this, and whilst we're not going to be building a build around this at all, it is a nice thing to have if you're just trying to gather a lot of enemies into one central location. For Valby's passive skill, because we're going to be using Supply Moisture, which in my opinion is by far and away her very best Transcendent mod, this is going to allow us to have an even better amount, much better amount of firearm critical hit rate, skill critical hit rate, and a little bit of skill duration. Now over to our weapons, and honestly, play with whatever weapons you really enjoy using. There's no right choice for this, but one I would highly recommend is going to be your Enduring Legacy. This thing is an absolute monster, probably my top pick of weapon at the moment in the game, as it's going to have some stable fire rate and it's just really easy to use. If you can, try and roll on it firearm critical hit rate, firearm attack, and firearm critical hit damage. Lastly, depending on your choice, either a little bit of fire attack or Colossus if you're going to be going more so for those bosses. As you can briefly see from the stats here, this is a crit based weapon, so you're going to want to try and enhance your critical damage more so than your weak point, and its unique ability is going to be Craftsmanship. This is going to give you the quenching effect on your enemies, allowing you to do a lot of extra damage to them because it's going to negate a bit of their fire resistance as well as upping your actual weapon attack damage when you do actually hit them with fire. Over to its setup, and I'm not going to go over every single mod because this video would be ridiculously long, but this setup I found to be absolutely ideal, as it will give you some amazing crit chance, crit damage, and also the expanded magazine means you can continually shoot at those Colossus for quite some time before you need to reload. After the single target, I've put a couple of mobbing weapons on. Thunder Cage, absolutely amazing, still the best mobbing weapon in the game if you're trying to take down multiple enemies, and I have not unfortunately done much with this, but if you can, try and get again critical hit chance, critical hit damage, and weapon damage in general on it. As you can see from the stats, again it is very based around crit chance this one, rather than weak point damage, and if we bop over to its other perk, the Overcharge, this thing is absolutely amazing for decimating groups of ads. It's going to create a kind of electric shockwave whenever you defeat enemies that's going to hit other multiple enemies and hopefully be able to take them down. The more you enhance this, the better it is, and the range goes up as well, which makes it absolutely perfect for taking down multiple small targets. And now apologies, I have not invested anywhere near enough into this weapon, but like I said, it's a crit based weapon, so you will be using very similar mods to the Enduring Legacy, just enhance it with crit chance, crit damage, and again if you did want to, you could also chuck on an expand weapon charge, although you won't be reaping the benefits quite as much because it's only got a small magazine size. Lastly, over to Greg's Reverse Fate. This is an absolute monster, and I really enjoy using this for long range, especially when you're kind of using it on kind of smaller or medium targets. This weapon's actually kind of a half and half weapon. It goes a little bit into crit, but it also goes a bit into weak point damage, so spec it out accordingly and use it as a bit of a hybrid. As you can see, the unique perk on it is also amazing because it's going to launch bombardments at the area that you're hitting, and even though they do only have a chance to proc, They happen very often and are able to decimate enemies in a nice area of effect. This right here is the setup that I found was best with it. This is going to allow you to get more damage on targets that are actually already suffering from burning. It's going to give you a high amount of fire rate, high damage for the actual weapon, high critical chance and critical damage, as well as specking a tiny bit into that weak point damage because, like I said, the gun is pretty tasty with that hybrid stuff. Now jumping over to the Reactor, and if you can, try and get your hands on a really nice gold version. These ultimate ones do work out the best for overall damage, especially with your skills, and it's going to help you to get nice tick damage out of all the times when enemies are on those water effects. My one come with the Greg's Reverse Fate Mountain, which is nice. Whenever I've got that equipped, it means the skill power goes up to 160%, but whichever weapon you find using most is probably ideal in this slot. You're going to want this with non-attribute skill power boost ratio and dimension skill power boost, as well as, if you can, with the modifiers down the bottom here, you're going to want non-attribute skill power boost, and finally, depending on what you want, increased duration to your skills or increased range. For the external gear, I found that using the Slayer set was definitely the best, as it's going to give us a nice bit of general rounds capacity, some rounds in our magazine. The skill cost unfortunately is going to go up a little bit, but the skill power goes up by 26.1% as well, which can help us to grab a little bit of extra damage with us. For our first one, the auxiliary power, you're going to want to make sure you grab MP recovery out of combat and max HP. If you can manage to grab both of these in gold, that would be absolutely ideal. For the sensor, you're going to want max MP, which is definitely needed for this build. And then for the next one, I managed to get shield recovery out of combat, but if you can, replace this with MP recovery in combat, and that will make it absolutely perfect. For the memory, a little bit of defense and shield recovery in combat works ideal, and lastly, finishing off the set, allowing us to get all 4 pieces of that set bonus, you're going to have your processor, which ultimately doesn't have any stats on it that really benefit you too much, but best in slot would probably be max shield and shield recovery modifier if you can manage to get hold of them. Now just for a few seconds I'm going to show you exactly how the socket layout is, because I find this helps massively when you're trying to do a build, and then after that I'll go over with exactly what we're doing and what mods we have on our setups. So over to our first setup, and this one I use for kind of regularly farming gold and just getting the most of an area effect and such, and it can also be quite nice in some of the missions as long as they're not too tough. For the toughest content I'll probably go over to the second build, which has a little bit more survivability to it. The first mod we're using is going to be our Descendant. Like I said, supply moisture, absolutely amazing. We've already seen what this does. It's just going to allow us to get the most out of our skills, but also give us a great 20% extra critical strike chance with our firearms. Over to amplification control, this one's going to give you a massive skill effect range, as well as giving us a nice bit of extra shield. Skill simplification, this one is a great one for our skill modifier, allowing for our tick damage to go through the roof, but does however have a negative effect of taking away from some of our max MP. Another one we'll be using will be MP conversion. This one has an abundance of skill cooldown, but again takes away from our max MP by 15% unfortunately. This however works great in a lot of scenarios, especially when you're gold farming and such, but if you did want to swap this out, you can quite easily do it when you're running regular missions by chucking on something like Nimble Fingers, which will have no real deficit to it. Skill expansion is just going to be something you'll need to get the most out of your kind of skill effect range, and it's going to give a whopping 92.3%. Skill concentration, this is going to make you hit like a truck, skill critical hit damage plus 115%. Absolutely amazing if you want big numbers. Then we're going to pop down to emergency measures. This one's going to give us a massive amount of skill critical hit rate as well as some skill critical hit damage to boost it up once more. Skill extension, this is going to give you a bit of duration, perfect for almost all of your skills. And Battle of Stamina, it's going to give you maximum HP as well as a little bit of skill duration added on top of it. Over once again, and we're going to have focus on non-attribute. This is going to give you a nice bit of skill power boost as well as a little bit of cooldown. And a standard on a lot of my builds, almost all of them, is going to be your max HP, just to give you a little bit of survivability. Lastly, but definitely not least, I always like having mid-air manoeuvring, one of the best mods in the game for just ease of use and being able to use your grapple very easily. For our second setup, I've tried to make this a little bit more about going into gun damage and a bit of survivability, whilst also still making it really nice around her kit. And the main changes are going to be, you're going to want to have iron defense on, as this is going to give you a bit more defense and skill power modifier as well. HP amplification over in this slot, which is going to give you max HP, but it does unfortunately take a little bit away from your max shield. If you want to swap this out and just go with HP, you very well can. Frugal mindset, that one's going to give you negative skill cost as well as skill effect range, so we're getting a little bit of extra range to our skills overall. And HP collector, which I love in all my builds because it's going to allow for a bit of survivability. Time distribution is going to give you skill cooldown as well as some max HP, so an absolutely ideal in slot for this build. and then just down from here, shot focus, firearm attack power, but it does knock a bit of your skill power modifier down, but on bosses and such and the tougher enemies, you'll be more focused on your weapons anyway. Then in these slots, skill expansion, again, going to be nice and needed because you want to be on that water at all times, a little bit of defense, and then we're finishing it off with skill insight and skill concentration, just have a little bit of crit chance and crit damage in the mix. But yeah, overall both of these builds work absolutely ideal. One is for kind of doing your skills or farming or just kind of having a bigger area effect with nice tick damage, and the second one is used whenever you don't want to fall over and you want to take on some of the toughest content in the game. But yeah, the only difference to this, I didn't actually set up in the end, would be if you need to change your Transcendent card, but that would only be on the boss battle for Gluttony. If so, you take off your Supply Moisture and you chuck on Spiral Tidal Wave if you want to be doing those bubbles towards the boss. But yeah, other than that, hopefully this has helped a few of you guys and girls out. I've had a lot of fun making this build, and there'll be a lot more tips and build guides for the weapons and characters, and of course some of the seasonal content on its way. As always, for All Things Gaming, take care. I'll see you on the next day.